today is going to be a Blender 2.5 tutorial. I'm using Blender 2.56 beta, and it's going to be a pretty simple tutorial, so I might throw some extra things in there getting our scene set up. But basically, I'm going to show you how to create depth so that things in the background are out of focus and things in the foreground are out of focus. So like working with the focus on a lens. So here's our default scene. I'm going to hit 7 on the number pad to go into top view, and I'm just going to quickly hit Shift D and clone the default cube a whole bunch so that we have things in the foreground and things in the background. Let's have a look here. I'm going to go into side view here and use 6 on the number pad till I get a nice little side view of the camera here, and I'm going to rotate it up a little. Then I'll go into quad view, Control Alt Q. This is all stuff I've gone over in the past. And I'm going to grab and lower this. I'm going to rotate this a little bit like that. And then I'm going to move some of this stuff around. Just getting a bunch of different things in different views. And I want this cube to be right in the center here. Control Alt Q to get back into the regular view here. Once again, I'm going to, I think I rotated this camera a little too much for what I'm looking for. There we go, that's more like it. Move it up a little bit. I'm also going to go into top view, and I'm going to add a plane, and I'm going to scale it up pretty big. Grab it, move it like so. Let's have a, and then we'll go into side view and bring it down a little bit so the cubes are sitting on it and it's not going through the cubes. We'll hit F12 and get a quick look at this. So this is what our scene looks like so far. And before we get into the defocus and the lens focus here, let's quickly go to world here. I'm going to make the sky white, and I am going to turn on ambient occlusion. And we'll hit F12 there, just to get us a nicer looking image than the default light settings there. Okay, so now that we have our scene set up, and I actually might add some more cubes a little further away real quick. So real quick, I'm just going to grab a few of these, Shift D, bring them back here, Shift D, maybe rotate them around a little bit just to get a different little view here. Go back to our camera view here. Again, I'll render out just to see how that looks. Okay, so I've got cubes up close, cubes far away, but we want to set it so that this center cube here is in focus and everything behind it and closer to us from it are out of focus. So we'll choose our camera here. So our camera is selected. We'll press 3 on the number pad to get a side view of the camera here. And I'll click with the camera selected, this little camera tab here, and I'm going to turn on limits, and you'll see that adds a line, and that's where the camera is pointed. And if I start moving the distance up and out, you'll see that has that little yellow crosshair in 3D view, and that is where the camera is going to be focused on. So let me quickly go into top view here, and I'm going to move distance up until that crosshair is inside this cube here, since this is the cube that we want to be in focus. So now if we hit F12, you'll notice there's no difference, and that's because we have to go into the compositor and set up a defocus node to defocus based on that distance. So we'll come up here to by our little default scene settings, and we'll go to a composite setup. I'll choose nodes and backdrops so that we can see the composite real time in the background there. I'm also going to hit F12 real quick just to get our render view down here so we can see what the default 3D render looks like. And you'll notice that this little black cube, when we have backdrop on, is just black instead of our composite, and that's because we don't have a view set. So we're going to hit Shift A and go up to Output and choose Viewer. And when you do that, make sure you're up here in the composite window and not in another window, or else that won't work. And in this case, since I had this window selected, it automatically connected the images. If it didn't, just grab the yellow image here and go to the yellow image on view, and you'll get your view here. You can also use the V key to zoom that image out, and then I think it's Shift V or Alt V. Alt V will zoom it back in. And I'll do that just so we have a little working room, but we can still see the whole image here. I'm going to minimize our composite window here, and I'll even minimize this view window here. And then I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to choose a filter, and I'm going to go down to defocus. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect the image input to the image input here, and the image output to the image output on our viewer here. So far, no difference in the composite view there. We have to take our Z, which is our depth from our camera, connect it to the Z here, and we'll choose Use Z Buffer. As you saw, it started to It started to blur based on the settings here, but we want it based on that lens depth we set, and that's why we choose Use Z Depth, which we just connected there. Now, looking here, we don't see a whole lot of difference right off the bat, and that's because our f-stop is pretty high based on where our camera is. So if we start moving the camera view down, we'll change it to 50. I don't think we'll see too much. There'll definitely be a difference. There's a little bit of a blur going on now. We'll move it down to 25. And notice anytime I make changes to the settings here, there's a little composite bar here. Whoop, and it goes away once it's done, but that's compositing the differences. And you can definitely see a little bit of a blur going on now. I'm going to turn it way down. I'll turn it to 5, and we'll see a huge difference. And so there you can see that the cubes up front are definitely blurred, and the ones in the back are really blurred. But they're almost like you're looking through a not clear piece of glass. They're kind of pixelated, and that's due to the number of samples. Now, the number of samples is set pretty low to 16 right now. The higher you set it, the smoother the blur is going to be, but also the longer it will take to composite. And you'll realize that when we're doing one frame. Now, imagine you're doing a video that's 30 frames a second, but I'm probably going to set it higher than this, but we'll start off at 64 samples. And you'll see the compositing bar right here is compositing, and it's taking a little bit longer. And you can definitely see it's definitely smoother now. I'm going to double that up to 128. And compositing once again slows down even more. And there we go. You can see that it's definitely a very smooth blur now. Now, there's also different types of blur you can do. The default is circle. You can do a square. I haven't really played with these too much. Let's see if we really see a difference. Compositing. Yeah, I don't really see too much of a difference there. I'll set it back to circle. But you can play with those settings. You can also set a maximum blur and a threshold. But you notice, as we're saying, it's taken a few seconds. But let's say it takes 5 seconds for your computer to render that one frame. Once again, if you're doing a video of 30 frames a second and you want to do like a minute-long video, it's going to take forever to render the simple scene just by adding this blur effect. So anyway, we have that set, and we can now minimize that once we have all the settings we want, and we can see what the composite view looks like. But if we hit F12 and we get our little render down here, you'll notice that it doesn't add the blur to our render output. Why is that? Because we haven't connected our defocus, our final composite, to our compositing renderer up here. So take the yellow from the defocus here, connect it to the composite view here. Now, I don't know if it's going to do it automatically. It says it's compositing. When that's done, if it's not, I'll hit F12. Okay, it did do it. So you have your 3D render with the composite view there. At this point, I can hover over this render output. I can hit F3. And now you can, don't forget, you can always set different settings. In fact, let's turn this resolution all the way up and hit F12 again. And it's going to be a bigger image. It's going to take longer to render, so we're adding more rendering time. But you have your rendering settings over here, and you can choose type and whether you want to be black and white or RGB with alpha, stuff we've all gone over in the past. And if you're doing a video, you can set the frame range. But if you just want the single shot, like this one is right here, and as you can see, it's taken longer just to render the 3D view since we just basically doubled the image size, which actually, let me cancel that render by clicking this little X up here. And I'm just going to put that back down to 50 because this is going to be an image I'm going to upload to my website for you guys to view as an example. So put that down to 50% the size. Still pretty large because it's an HD resolution right now. So I'll render it out. It's rendered, and now we're waiting for it to composite that blur, that defocus blur. And there we go. I am going to hit, with my cursor over the rendered view here, the composited view, I'll hit F3. And I'll just go to my temp folders where I'm going to save this. I'm going to save it as defocus.png. And I will save that. I'll now open up that window, that image in a image viewer, just for fun. And I'll hit, I think, F11. There we go. So that's our final view. I'll upload this image to our website. You can also, if you didn't want to open up another view, or if you hover over the render down here and hit Control Up, make sure you're clicked into Blender. Control Up, it makes that full screen, that little window there, and then you can zoom in. I just wanted to save it to an image so I can upload it. So that is our final image right there. I thank you for watching. I hope you learned a little bit. Also, you notice you probably, when you're doing this, in most cases, don't want to set the defocus up this high, because it kind of makes things look really small. And if you're familiar at all with photography, there's a thing called tilt shift photography, I think is what it's called. I saw a thing on it back in Make Magazine. If you ever watch Make Magazine videos, they showed you how to make a tilt shift lens for your camera with an old lens and a plunger, believe it or not. And basically what it does is it makes things so out of focus in the background that it makes things look really small. And you'll see images, if you Google it, of like shots of cars on the street and people on the street, and it looks like it's a miniature set, but it's actually real life image. It's just with things being so out of focus, things look miniature. So depending on the view, the look you want, you may or may not want to make it that defocused. But if you're looking at this, you'll realize that even though that we didn't change the size of the cubes, or things look smaller. So keep that in mind when you are working on the defocus. In real life, most of the time, things are out of focus and distance if you're using a good camera with a good lens, but they're not going to be this out of focus all the way around. Unless you're using like the macro lens option on your camera, or using a tilt shift lens. So keep that in mind. I'll upload this image, and I'll even upload this blend file for you guys to play with, even though it's pretty simple. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please visit filmsbykris.com. That's Chris with a K. There's links in the description to this post where you can also download the blend file and the image we just rendered. And I hope that you have a great day.